Thanks for coming, Harry, by the way.
Thanks for having me.
I know that you're not a big conference fan, it sounds like.
I mean, I'm normally an in and out guy.
Yeah.
This conference is hugely beneficial because you get extra drinks for staying. So
yeah, that's right. Unlimited booze. Well, do me a favor, introduce yourself to anybody that's listening and doesn't know who you are yet.
Cool. I'm Harry Beamish. I'm a founding partner of Pristine Energy. So we're a developer of low carbon baseload power. Essentially, we use natural gas as a fuel source and we capture all the CO2 and repurpose it. We've launched in the US about 6 months ago, and things are getting exciting.
So you're out of Houston, I'm guessing, with that energy?
We are, exactly. So, originally set up in Florida, but then obviously naturally gravitated to Houston as is the way.
It's the hub. Well, listen, so I'm really excited that you're here. First of all, I just had a chance to meet you for the first time yesterday. And I remember, we were sitting down and it looks like you had a couple buddies that were pressuring you to come to it, just kind of, and you just got into the data center industry, what, a year and a half ago?
Yeah. And that's also kind of a little bit why I'm here is like, we put together an energy solution with carbon capture. So, this originally was developed by a group called Landmark Power. I've been working with them for 5 years. I put together the capital package. We built the first plant. It's operated. The patent's operating in the UK. We've put together a whole development pipeline in the UK. There's projects coming online. Part of that relationship was, look, I believe strongly that this has a huge home in the US. Now, we've done a lot in terms of creating the product, i.e. technically, financially, we've got financial backers who are keen to come in, support projects. We've got developments ongoing in different states. We've got a team. What we don't really have is depth in terms of data center relationships. So we're working with a great contractor called Mercury, and they were like, look, Harry, this is your coming out party. I'm going to take you around ACDC and you're going to meet everyone. So there we are. That's a little history.
Well, how's it been? We met yesterday and you're like, I'm not a huge conference fan. I don't think many of us are these days. Most of these conferences, they only offer me like the opportunity to get a few hangovers and a few business cards, but I haven't. These conferences are where I built my career at first, because there was a construct within these conferences that was really truly designed around building a network.
Yeah.
Today we use social media and we use technology like Instagram or LinkedIn or something to build networks. Now we've evolved as an industry to where we just build relationships, and those still need to have an environment to create an orbit around itself so you could have a greater exchange of ideas between people like you, me, the other parts of this industry that are in the ecosystem that really move the needle. And I think it was Brittany from our team was like, you got to talk to this guy. So we started talking and like, listen, man, not a big conference dude. I'm like, me neither, to be honest with you, but let's see how this one unfolds. Different conference than what you're used to?
Absolutely. And I think, what's different I think also it's different in terms of an industry because, I've been in power 17 years, not in power.
Yeah.
In the power sector. But, the reality is a typical power transaction is, a couple of parties and then an EPC in the middle or whatever. Yeah. I mean, a few with the evolution or revolution we're seeing in data is like the requirement for so much collab is insane. Yeah. So there isn't a way, because the future is unfolding as we speak. He's like, there isn't. And so as a result, everyone's so much more open to engage. Because they're not like, well, I've got a product, I need that product, and that's that. Because they don't really know how they need to get from A to B or to C to whatever. So I think that's and the refreshing thing about this environment is it starts with that collaborative atmosphere.
Well, what we also want to do is create that environment to where that collaborative environment and atmosphere exists. And then the platform itself is designed there's other conferences that exist. And to get on those stages, you're going to need to invest a bucket of money, or you're going to have to be some industry luminary that shows up to get an award, every year at some of these conferences. And we're neither of those things, right? This is what we call the People's Conference, which is we want to create a platform where anybody could have a voice. You don't have to be in this industry for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You could be in it for a year and a half, but be in energy forever. And that industry is adjacent to us, but we actually needed the energy vertical to collide with us because it's a much more mainstream, mature industry that has the ability to pull our industry into the mainstream, because I mean, did you know shit about data centers a few years ago?
No, not at all. I think I'd probably heard that they just needed 2 grid connections. That was like all I knew about their power requirements.
And now you're realizing like cloud data centers have a requirement, AI data centers have a different requirement.
Yeah, and they're a requirement now, and what they're going to have in 3 years, they're not entirely sure. And so there's some really interesting guys here, like on the software side of things, managing that, which I think is pretty cool. So as I said, for us, it's like we've got a really interesting product, we believe, that we think can solve part of the problem. But what we're getting here is people that want to help us solve that problem.
Well, I think that you should hopefully come away from here with known or discovered demand for that. Power was always perceived as one of the top 2 existential threats in this industry. And it kind of is. I mean, we're sitting in Ireland that had a moratorium on energy, right? They kind of, if you're in this industry and you understand what's happening, you realize that Ireland won't understand the hangover they're going to have from that moratorium, but they'll feel it in 5 years from now when they can't get back in the game after the rest of the UK or Europe starts evolving more in energy, because that's where the data centers are going to go, right? And that has an impact on community and society. It's hard, though. I don't blame them. They don't understand. But you guys offer something that's different, which is why I wanted to unpackage it a little bit. What is a growing trend in the United States is that we don't have enough grid capacity to support the demand of the adoption rate of emerging technology, specifically driven by the surge of AI. So we're going into bespoke markets that are non-NFL or primary cities, because we're also no longer building cloud products all the time. We're also building AI. And those are large language model data centers that just take time to feed and train. And it could take years, right? And it just takes a lot of energy. So we could go build these things in different places. And we thought we were out of energy until we realized that the natural gas solution for the world right now is very healthy and very established, right? So we go, okay, well, look, distributed natural gas generation plants will be a big part of our future, recips and turbines. But the truth is that's almost not good enough. And there's very few groups that are slow. In the US, you see a lot of groups racing towards distributed gas plants as an alternative solution for islanding these data centers. But you're not seeing a lot of carbon capture is a big part of the strategy. And I don't really understand. We could agree that it's probably a cultural thing, right? Mm-hmm. But I also think that there's a factor that plays into it based on, I was saying a statistic yesterday where I'm like, if you take all the data centers outside of the United States and added them all together, it's still not as many as the amount of data centers that exist within the United States, which means that we're the biggest manufacturer of data center, which means we're the biggest manufacturer of cloud and the biggest manufacturer of AI right now. So over there, we are going to build at a different volume and velocity. We build 100 megawatt data centers at a click, and that's 1,400 people that mobilize to build it, 100 people that stay behind to operate it, and there's millions of gallons of water flushed through a closed loop system a day, and you obviously understand what the power delivery methods look like. We haven't, at that scale, been able to slow down and optimize how we treat the rejection or the waste, the carbon. And we haven't had to, because we're just buying offsets typically in the United States. When these large hyperscalers come in and say, hey, we're doing 100% renewable by 2030, they're just saying, I'm going to buy enough offsetting carbon credits to where I'm offsetting what I have to make myself neutral. Now, simultaneously, to their credit, they're trying to race towards means and methods to get cleaner, more renewable. But you offer a process that you guys probably have patents around, I'm sure, that really makes that a primary vehicle to the model. And it's advantageous to these people because it allows us to open up a larger deployment volume because of the way you're managing the offsets of carbon.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think, the system is proprietary. The patent was registered in the UK by Landmark Power. We've licensed that patent, that solution for the US. I think, the interesting thing is obviously, you refer to CO2 as a waste, but, the reality is,
how do you repurpose it, and what is the purpose for it?
So there's not actually really a lot of uses for CO2, which there's no reason why you ever would have thought about it. But the food industry, huge demand.
In what way? For growing?
Carbonated drinks, Coca-Cola.
Really?
Example. Yeah. So the CO2 needs to be harvested somewhere, and then it's carbonate drinks. So we love. we love the idea of that. You can actually crack open a Coca-Cola that you kind of might produce
and drink the waste of a data center.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
I've never thought about it.
So yeah, that's a very Yeah, that's it.
But there's a lot of commercial uses for it, it sounds like.
Yeah, and in particular, one of the other ones which is massively growing is sustainable aviation fuel. So airlines have got a huge commitment in regards to their CO2 commitments. So they need to reduce their commitments, their production massively. The way they're doing it is going to use sustainable aviation fuel. So we would take the CO2 from our plant and blend it into the fuel, and then it gets reburned. So you actually, what are you using is you're burning it twice.
So you're putting the waste into JPF, and then that's making that JPF more efficient?
Well, it's more the fact you just use the molecule twice. So
Okay.
it's like you just half the amount. You see what I'm saying?
So what's the application look like for that? When you're going to go build a data center that has a power plant that's using these, are you building a manufacturing plant adjacent to this?
So
how do you store it?
It's like similar to the collab thing. Reality is what we would do on site is, power plant. So at the moment we're focusing on recips. We like the flexibility that gives. And then we may or may not include an energy heat recovery system in there. And then there's the carbon capture. The carbon capture is captured, cleaned with an amine solution, and then liquefied and held in tanks until someone comes and picks it up.
Is that it?
That's it. So on the smaller scale, that will be picked up in trucks. In US scale, obviously everything is much, much bigger. So that's how our development focus has been. So we have identified all our locations based around gas availability and existing CO2 infrastructure. So in Texas, for example, the demand is there's a huge CO2 infrastructure based around enhanced oil recovery. So there are big sequestration partners. We have, what we do is we have offtake agreements with them. So the moment it gets to the tanks, then they take it. It's nothing to do with us. And we actually get a long-term revenue stream as a result.
So they're buying it.
They're buying it. Well, there's at the moment in the US, it falls under the tax credit regime, the 45Q. So there's a different incentive for permanent sequestration and then usage. But yeah, that's a revenue stream. And then depending on the location, there is the additional revenue stream of a carbon credit. But the whole point is that where we're getting to is that we as a power supplier, we're not going to a client saying, hey, you need to buy more, you need to pay more for this power. This is, LCOEs, depending on the state, but $80 in Texas, we're pretty competitive. So we feel we can offer competitive power prices because of this additional revenue stream. And in addition to that, because we have an additional revenue stream, we can also tailor make the resilience, and it has less of an impact on the overall power price. So if we want to put, instead of 10 engines, we want to put 12, the proportional amount of CapEx is not that much more. So the impact on the power price is limited, but we can still provide that level of backup resilience and almost design it depending on the client requirement.
What was the genesis behind this technology? Was it driven based on regulation?
So the brainchild behind this is a guy called Mick Avison. So he's a long-term power guy. So he's a CEO of Landmark Power, and he, weirdly enough, I think if I remember the story correctly, he's been working on this solution since I think like 15 years or something. And originally he was working for a utility in Italy, had this idea, and anyway, it got kiboshed. And then eventually he got the designs underway. And that's when I met him in 2020 through his partner is an old colleague of mine. And then we put together the capital package. They built the plant, it's operating. I spoke to him actually last week, and I was like, yeah, we've got liquid CO2 in the tanks. So that's pretty exciting stuff.
That is really exciting. What is
But the data center thing's totally new. We literally last summer were like, this data center power problem is we can provide the solution.
How did you figure that out?
How did we figure it out? So I think we had a bit of a brainstorm. I think the original inception of the one Mick was, I think, at an MTU conference. So okay. Rolls-Royce are a project partner of Landmarks. And they were talking about, some of the data center products. And from that, it was like, well, we can rapidly deploy. We make sense behind the meter. And so that's why heavily when we got involved in terms of creating that development pipeline in the UK. And then off the back of that, I spent a long time in the Americas, in the energy space. I had a business in Mexico for 10 years, and then did a lot of work in the US and some consulting. And that's why I met Tom Doyle, who's the CEO of Pristine. So he was back in the day, he was one of the big drivers of the big solar revolution in the mid-teens, when, thousands, gigawatts and gigawatts got deployed as head of NRG. So I was like, you know what, this makes a lot of sense in the UK. The power problem's the same in the US. It's just bigger. And, there are, despite, there's a lot of velocity and people aren't stopping, etc., but there's still, air control issues and such like. And, at the end of the day, some of these big end users, they are multinationals. They do have climate commitments. So what we wanted to do was create a product that is easy for them to commit to, because it's not extra cost. And it can be deployed in an accelerated fashion.
So not only is it not extra cost, does it offset the cost? Does it make it more economically efficient? Is there some speed advantages?
I think it depends on the jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. I think, if you take somewhere like California, I think we'd be confident that we are cheaper than grid power.
Yeah. Is there a limit to how much of that you can provide? Like how big are these power plants capable of growing to, I guess? So
I think the developments we've got are huge, as you can imagine.
Up to 200 megs,
so the developments themselves, like the permitting process, etc., the actual sites themselves can do up to like a gigawatt. Where we see real value is that first 200 megawatts. How that evolves the next 800, whether it's 200, another 200, and then maybe combined cycle or whatever, is a little bit TBC, but we know that because of our process, we can deploy that first 200 megawatts in the key time zone, which is, in terms of installation of the power component, theory, 18 months, 18 to 24 months.
Like everybody else.
Exactly. Right? So we can do that, but we can, from a planning perspective, in particularly more challenging areas, we feel that we're more competitive because we have that additional kind of carbon capture component.
And that carbon capture component to a person that is one of your customers, the benefit to them is that it reduces their costs at some capacity?
It can reduce their costs, and obviously it all depends on what you're comparing it to. No?
Well, let me ask the other question, which isn't a function of economics, but it's efficiency. So there are limitations to how much, like I've done projects before in Salt Lake City, right? Yeah. Where they have the inversion tables, which are worse than LA, right? So there's a limit. I mean, I had to run 4 or 5 month long studies to figure out how much. I had to do all kinds of models to figure out how I could run engines at that altitude and what the emissions would be and, what my limitations would be. Is in doing the carbon capture, does it take where if I would have perhaps ran a traditional model that said, hey, you could do up to 100 megawatts, arbitrary number, in this vicinity because that's how many offsets you can have. Can I go into a market now and double my density as an example and be like, oh, I could do twice as much there because I have carbon capture?
To some extent, again, like conceptually, yes. Okay. So the reality is, stuff like clean air protocols, we can, in theory, it depends on the location, but avoid kind of federal processes. So again, to get the scale of 150, 200 megs, there's few faster ways of doing it because we have the follow-on part, which is the carbon capture, which allows for that clean air. We manage that clean air protocol.
When you first originally started this product, though, it wasn't really intended to be used in the data center application. It was in a regular manufacturing or commercial?
So Mick and Landmark guys developed it as a trading tool. So that's why actually they were like, well, as you know, in Europe and the UK, the European trading scheme has been operating for a while. So that goes up and down, but it can be as high as 80 pounds a ton. You pay when you have to trade the credit. So that's a liability. No? So you saw that as an opportunity. And then that's why the configuration is multiple engines. And the name of the patent is actually Flex Power Plus, which is and because it allows it to be very flexible, so you could actually trade on the grid, take advantage of all the different kind of mechanisms. So that's how it was actually originally designed. Now, I think where we are right now is that it will continue to evolve. I think that's what's really interesting about this event, is because what we've got right now and what the guys have developed is a really, really robust product. How it evolves is, we can take things away and add things to it. And that will go with the market. And so as long as you've got developments in the right locations, the key fundamentals, i.e. for us, we know what we're doing with the CO2, we know we've got gas, we know we've got water, all the key development fundamentals. Well, then the rest is almost like, well, we will design it with the data center partner. And that's kind of where we're at. We're like, we've done a lot of this work and now in the position of like, well, guys, here are our sites, let's engage, let's see what we can do.
So let's talk about it. So who is the ideal customer for that product? Is it a member of the G1K or the Global Fortune 1000? Is it one of the top 10 hyperscalers in the world that represent 80% of the market spend? Or is it the data center owner operators, it's basically another oligopoly like the airline industry that has a very limited amount of people that move the needle?
Yeah.
Who is Nirvana?
It's interesting because I think one of the things I really like about the product on the smaller scale, probably should be talking about the bigger stuff because that's probably better for me, but I like the smaller bit in the sense that I've always been quite focused on efficiency. I remember when I worked in the solar industry with feed-in tariffs and was pretty frustrated with the whole system. I was like, it just didn't rub well for me. Moved into distributed generation, and then actually my first experience with gas, which against all the kind of renewables background I had, was working in a cogen plant, and I couldn't believe the impact it had, reducing water consumption by 50%, a retrofit of a boiler gas system, putting in an efficient cogen. The impact's huge, savings of 30-40%, reduction of water emissions by 60%,
power densities improved,
all that, and I was like, the efficiency is where it's at. So our first little escapade now, when we first started talking to some data centers, was normally about supplementary power, which we quite like. So we think that's a really interesting efficiency. So someone's gone, hey, I need 100 megawatts or from the grid, and they can't get it. The extra 10, 15, 20, 30, and we can come in and deliver that as part of their offering. And that's a really interesting area. And that we're supplementing the growth of existing systems or existing data centers where they're in grid or land constrained areas. No? So that's pretty interesting. And then I think, look, the reality is the big stuff we're doing, well, we need the big guys. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And we believe that, from a branding perspective, from a climate commitment perspective, that we would hope that these guys are interested to engage. And I said some of the more complicated locations to put capacity online, i.e. like California, is a bit. It's hard for everyone. We think it's a bit easier for us, which again, in relative terms, the value is there, because if you are one of the hyperscalers and you do want to add capacity to to whatever you are in California, it's quite challenging. If there's
SQL will have requirements, but if you're doing carbon capture, it helps get you an advantage.
That's the idea, and I think that's there's a lot of detail. And to be honest, I'm not the development expert in the US, as you can tell, but the fundamentals are pretty strong. And we believe that, and we believe and we hope, that we're getting some positive signs that there is collaboration even with the ISOs, that actually people are going, you know what, we can be part of this rather than we're with you, not against you. So I think that's an interesting evolution.
Well, how do you see that playing out? Will they give you design standards and say, hey, as long as you're building along these standards, then we could do an interconnection grid request in the future and bring it
along those lines? So that's how we see it panning out. So look, it's going to be private wire to begin with, behind the meter, etc. But that evolution as well, they should step in due course. So,
going back to the question, who's the ideal client? Is it an enterprise client? Is it a hyperscale client? Is it an operator? And if so, then it sounds like you want to be supplementing their stuff and not the primary, but you want to help them get over the finish line on volume.
Yeah, I think it all depends. Again, it's location specific. We on this side of the pond talk about the US as a country, and it's just not. It's continent with lots of, I mean, even within Texas, like, the permitting and the different counties are different. Right? So for us,
I saw an image on my social media the other day that showed Texas, and it showed how many countries in Europe could fit inside Texas.
it's ludicrous. No?
Yeah. I mean, like in West, we joke and we say the sky for the cloud in the world. It is Northern Virginia. It's the home of the largest company in the United States, which is the federal government, which was the largest adopter of cloud. But the home for AI is going to be Texas. I'm not saying we won't have AI in different places, but a large part of the manufacturing of AI data centers, because you build these large language models, then you get into inference, which is where the revenue models fit. And then you get into agentic, and then you get into, there's things beyond that. But my thing is right now AI is basically in its teenage adolescence right now.
Yeah.
We're using what we think is great AI, but in a few years from now, we'll realize, looking back, it's the worst AI we've ever seen in our lives, right? But today, it's the only AI we got. The only thing I think that the product that you have is not just technologically important, but it has an impact on national security, because AI is just a race for energy. And anything that gets us one step closer to a solution that's transparent, predictable, scalable, that is a solution for national security, right? So, you have groups like China that are like, hey, by 2030, we're going to dominate the world in AI. And we're like, I don't know if we want that. Right? And I think that for us, it's patching together as many options and opportunities we can to deploy more volume and velocity of compute capacity, because AI is just an energy hog, just like cloud was, but AI is at a different level. Right. So like a lot of these things aren't going to be grid connected in Texas right off the bat. They're going to island themselves for a few years, right? Because it's the only way. The utility providers want to be able to buy that later on and put it on their grid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So they're going to say, like, listen, that's good. You guys are going to go do that in that island out there by yourselves. That's great. If you ever want to shake hands with us, it better meet these standards. Yeah. Right. So if you could do all these other things you could do, that's great. But if it doesn't do this, it'll never tie back into our grid. Yeah. Right. So I think that you're seeing, we used to build data centers and the power was the client's problem. Now the power is part of the problem that we have to solve for as well. So having these conversations and understanding what is evolving. I mean, how far, this is a new piece of technical application, and you see it innovating, you see it evolving. Where do you see it going to where it has the greatest impact?
You mean from an AI perspective?
Yeah, well, just from a compute demand perspective, because the greatest compute demand will be AI, it won't be cloud, and they're going to need massive volumes of energy. So how does that help them? If you're a large developer right now and they're listening to this, they're going to be like, listen, if you're telling me I could do carbon capture, what's the upside and what's the downside? It giveth with one hand and it taketh with the other. So what is it, And
so, I think when you have, everything is subject to, political risk. So if I was to highlight a risk, it's political. People can change their minds, no? So, that ultimately what we define as waste, what we define as incentive, like that can change. And there's nothing you can do about that. But the reality is, from a product offering, we think it helps AI companies achieve their goals, because, as I said, we do believe that our process enables an accelerated deployment. And fundamentally, as I said, it's an industry which it is consumer facing. People have their commitments. We enable that. But fundamentally, the resilience and redundancy is always there. The way the design is set up, as I mentioned, you've got it's an energy island, but it's 3 components or 2 components. So if for whatever reason there is an issue with the carbon capture component, the gas carries on operating. Yeah. So the downside we don't see the downside. I mean, as I said, there potentially is, I said, if there's a political issue, there's a political issue, but that can apply to anything.
But if the carbon capture stops working, then there should be limitations to what you can do with those engines, right?
Sure,
a lot of the permits are predicated on that capacity.
But this is fully warranted.
I hear you. But from a reliability perspective, you're
absolutely,
not compromising
and you manage around that, and there's insurance products around it. So obviously, like with any working machine, if part of it breaks, there's a warranty. You fix it, and then it gets back on the way. Now, if you left the carbon capture out for 4 years, you're going to have a problem. But the reality is, it's the same. As long as you're following protocol and you replace the system, fix the system, then there's no reason why it should incur any liability.
Do you see the application used by the utility providers at some point where they're using it for frequency response? Or
yeah, I don't see why not. I think the reality is that operating a grid is getting more and more complicated. So why then? That's again what we like. The original design around the product was exactly that. So because of multiple engines, it can enable that flexibility. So I always see there's no reason why not. It'd be interesting to see how the grid does evolve and whether it actually just evolves into a set of microgrids. It might just be, it might become 20 different grids.
Is that how you see it innovating the product itself?
I think in general, decentralization is here. And I think what's, we in our lifetimes, we witnessed it with mobile, telecoms. And from that, and weirdly enough, obviously data is a massive driver. That's driven the data boom to some extent.
Well, we got into mobile phones, and that was a big thing because data became a commodity, right?
Exactly. So,
and then we got into smartphones, which were where we got into real.
Exactly, and this is so. But that was the decentralization of a communication network, no? Mm-hmm. And I've strongly believed for a long time that decentralization of power and general services. I think that obviously again location specific, but decentralization of core services is the trend. The reality is, we are globally connected, but it's becoming inefficient. Yeah. And actually what we need to do is consolidate the local, and that's why I was saying ERCOT might become 50 grids. That may make more sense in terms of the evolution. So I do believe that decentralization is a core theme, and how that evolves, I don't think that's beyond my pay grade.
Are there any countries that are more favorable for this or ones that are less favorable?
Well, yeah. So I think the driver in the UK, for example, is it's incredibly land constrained. So grid constrained and land constrained. So the demands, the developments we've got going on we think are going to be very well received. So because they're in key locations where, frankly, if you want a grid, you're waiting 10 years, and then in order to get that. To secure land with grid is just a very complicated and frankly impossible process. Now, other European countries, I think, also challenging. I think Germany, it's a pretty attractive product in Germany. The Nordics less so. They don't tend to have that much of a power issue. But then the US, again, we talk the US in generic terms. So I think, we're very, as I said, Pristine is focused 100% on the US.
Oh, wow.
Landmark Power, the original patent holder, is focused at the moment on the UK. So, we work together, we collaborate, but, Pristine is all guns blazing for the US. And frankly speaking, there isn't really there isn't a requirement to go anywhere else for the time being. Now, will the product evolve? It probably will. But key to our development is having those key components of the infrastructure, i.e. the pipelines,
the supply chain, everything.
So it's not going to work if there may, tomorrow, I don't know, if you wanted to do this at scale somewhere else, it'd be very hard to do because there isn't the CO2 infrastructure.
So let me shift gears off of the product and get back into the people side of us, right?
Yeah.
When you were getting introduced to this product, right? I mean, it sounds like you were there during the genesis. And originally, I mean, it was about a year and a half ago when you guys started really paying attention to the data center space?
Yeah, about a year.
What was it that
about a
triggered
year,
that attention?
actually. It was it was this just before summer. So it was literally about a year ago.
And how did the data center industry come on your radar?
So I think it came through a mixed relationship with Rolls-Royce.
Okay. And they're like, listen.
And then it was like, well, how do we do this? And then we focused on, I said in the UK, focused on land banking, getting some land, focus on then creating what we believe would be attractive. And now the next phase in the UK is to engage. And then meanwhile, I was like, I said with my relationship with Tom, I was like, we've got to do this together. So we built the team, the Pristine team in the US.
Does he sit in Houston?
He is based in Miami.
Okay.
But he's on a plane.
Yeah.
He's that guy, and he's he's got his crew, and he's getting stuff done.
I know how it goes. There's a lot of power people that sit in Miami. It's just a lifestyle for them, I think.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, it's obviously these days but where you have your actual home is less important. And then we've got guys in Houston, so it's like they're up, and we've got some guys in Arizona and California.
Well, look, I didn't. What haven't I asked that you feel is worth mentioning or worth sharing with these people regarding Pristine, this application technology? Because I really I like being able to introduce newer concepts into the game.
Yeah.
And I think it takes a lot. I think like the people in our space that you also need to have buy-in on it outside of the operators and the end users is their engineering partners.
Well, yeah.
The engineering partners play Caesar a lot, right? I mean, I don't want to trivialize the A&E teams within this industry because they do a lot, especially on the mechanical permutation this day. But there's only, 4 tier levels of a data center. We're really only building to half of those, a tier 2 or tier 3. And there's only, distributed redundant, block redundant. There's not too many different design options. So those engineers are very particular in how they deploy electrons, right? And have you had conversations with any of these design teams to figure out if it's a concept that they can help champion with you?
So, I mean, it's beyond the kind of, the relationships that, we have. So like Mark has a good relationship with ABK.
Okay.
For example, they actually built the existing plant. We have a good relationship with Mercury. But the next level, like the architects, funnily enough, that's some of the contacts I made here, and it's kind of fascinating. And I think the bit which is interesting for us in terms of the next phase is that engagement, and actually, like, well, what do you want to see?
Sure.
Because I think what we do think is quite compelling about the product is that the fundamentals are the fundamentals, but it is very bespokeable. We can design it based on a requirement. Yeah. And and that will potentially involve bringing in other complementary technologies. As I said, there's rapid response batteries, whatever it is. There are elements which can be incorporated into the core design to optimize and tailor it to what the demand, what is demanded.
What is the, do you guys have an end game? How does a product like this evolve? Does it get to the point where it's hoping to be bought by a utility provider, or is there?
I think for us at Pristine, we're focused on our value add, which is at the development phase, I think, creating that, those opportunities. How that evolves, I don't think we may well be kind of, one of those great success stories where people come and acquire us in 3-4 years' time. In the meantime, I think, the projects themselves are pretty interesting. We have institutional investors that, are in the wings waiting, and we've been self-funded to date, making sure we cook it. You know how it is. You want to cook the cake a little bit.
Yeah, you don't want to dilute.
And so we're at that point, and we've got great sequestration partners in which we're engaging with. We've got again all the pieces are there, and we're slowly getting there. And so we're pretty close to being in a position where it's going to be quite exciting.
Very cool. Well, this podcast was not meant to give people a PhD on your product. It was just to introduce it, right? Yeah. What else would you want people to know that are listening right now that I haven't had a chance to ask you about, but you feel it's worth sharing?
I think that's I feel like we've covered quite a lot.
I did have a few questions for you.
Yeah.
Look, as you can tell, I'm passionate about this industry, and I'm always curious about shit because I'm a consultant, right? We're owners reps. So I offer staff augmentation as a service. That's it, which means that our customers come to us and they expect us to have a wider aperture to the field of view of what's evolving in this industry than what they can see from the inside looking out of their own product. I
think actually human capital is actually one of the challenges which I think is overlooked.
Okay.
I think personally from a skill set perspective, like building a power plant, there are a lot of people who can build power plants, but how many people are there can build the power plants we need? Yeah. Like
and operate them.
I mean, the amount of people we're going to need just for the power component of AI is like it's insane. So, it's one of those, I think, conversations for another day that everyone's slightly ignoring, I feel.
Yeah.
And it's great. I mean, it's great here that everyone's very collaborative, but there's still the reality is we also just need bodies. There's a lot of people that need to get this done.
Talent is the number one threat to this industry, is finding the right amount of talent. Do you see this as something that you guys can take back to other groups? Like maybe MTU as an example has installed a bunch of stuff at other places, and maybe there's an opportunity to go in there and retrofit those ones with the carbon capture components?
Yeah, I think so. I think I think that's absolutely viable. I think, and again, it very much depends on location, but I think retrofit would be something that we'd be very keen to do. Again, I like that efficiency component.
Well, I mean, what I ask about is, like I was talking to a group yesterday. It was a small group of people. There were 20, 25 of them, and they're a GC, right? But they focus on retrofits. Okay. And a GC that's going out and building everything from the ground up, that's a monster, right?
Yeah.
And if you're doing a retrofit of an existing brownfield, that's a different type of monster. But if you're doing just like tenant fit outs, that's like saying, hey, they're all doctors, but one's a brain surgeon, right? And working on a shared infrastructure backplane of a live environment, it takes a very special skill set as a contractor. But we know that the densities for technology will just continue to get higher, and the topology and footprint for that technology will continue to get smaller, which means we're going to have to go rip out and replace the mechanical systems that almost every data center has ever been built on Earth. So depending on which AI tool you're using, we have anywhere between 8,000 and 11,800 data centers on this Earth. Majority of them don't have the right mechanical systems today to support the needs of technology in the future, which means every data center that we've ever built will one day be remodeled or refurbished into an AI data center, or they'll be decommissioned at some point. I can see this type of technology being used to go in and extend the life of other places because maybe they have the ability to grow more because now they have the ability to caption the carbon, and that gives them the ability to stay there and kind of swell or grow themselves within those. It allows them to not have to go take down more real estate. The densities can continue to grow higher, and the topologies could get smaller or stay the same. The only thing that's different is the greater volume of energy that's being deployed, right? Yeah. And it sounds like if I go to a place that's existing, I could retrofit it, and I could buy proxy and carbon, and capturing the carbon increase the ceiling or the limit at which how much power you could put there. Is that right?
I think so. I mean, again, location specific, but yeah, the logic sounds
like everything about this product is really about location.
I mean, everything about this market is location. No?
Yeah, that's fair. It's very true. There's two types of data centers. The cloud data centers were heavily latency sensitive. They had to be so far from, NFL cities and where all the eyeball content and video caching was. These large language model AI data centers, we go build them in a cornfield out in the middle of nowhere. No one ever has to see them, which is good from an energy perspective, because I do believe that opens up the door for us to plant SMRs away from other people so they could get used to the concept of those being there.
Yeah, I mean, the SMRs is like, to me, it's like sharks. We've spent 50 years scaring people, and now we're like, actually, we kind of want nuclear. And like everyone's like, no.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, it's this crazy thing. It's literally, so it's I think there's various lobby groups who've got a lot to answer for in that respect.
Well, I watched, have you ever watched Nuclear Now by Oliver Stone?
No, I haven't. No.
It's on Apple TV. I highly encourage anybody that's listening to go educate themselves. You don't have to be an Oliver Stone fan. It's a very objective film that shows the difference. It breaks down the dichotomy between nuclear weapons and nuclear energy first. But you'll have Sierra Club and Greenpeace and all these groups that are tree huggers like us that are running around saying no nukes, and they're realizing that shit was propaganda. Like, look, we got a lot of things right.
100%.
That part was wrong. 100%. We needed more nuclear energy than anything else. And by the way, the amount of waste that we've ever created in nuclear energy today is enough to fill up one football field. The amount of waste that's created from just imagine the amount of death that's created by the harvesting of coal, let alone the people that suffer as a byproduct of that
just
energy.
Gas fires. Everything. The last 100 years, totally.
It's almost like you said it, you're spot on. We've been conditioned for the last 50 years to be afraid of shit because that's what propaganda is capable of doing. Thank God technology is the only thing giving us more visibility and transparency into that shit.
Absolutely.
And I think that what you're going to see is a lot of people going, I'm sorry, like, why aren't we doing this again? And I think that it's only a matter of time. Still, we're going to have a stepping stone to get there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, we like in a past life, I was developing wind farms. You know how difficult it is bizarrely difficult to get a wind farm planning through, like when it's in the eyesight of a village. You're like, guys, really? Yeah. And so you're going to go to the same people and go, hey, do you mind if we just put this little nuclear plant next to your playground?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be a challenge. But
well, I think the optics are less. It's your job and my job. And like I did a panel today with a lady from Georgia Tech that flew in. She has a PhD from MIT in nuclear energy. And I just did a podcast with another guy with a PhD from MIT in nuclear energy. And the thing is it's almost like in the way they discuss it, I feel like we have to walk up to people that are looking through binoculars at nuclear energy. We have to be like, hey, listen, let me just hold this real quick. And then we have to flip the binoculars around and give them back to them. Be like, you've been looking at it all wrong.
Yeah.
Try to look at it now. Now do you see it not as the challenge, but as the opportunity or the solution?
Yeah.
We just have to change the optics how these people view this shit.
Absolutely. And I think it's, as I said, it's part of the solution. But I think this is a little bit, about what we're trying to achieve is that we need multiple solutions. We would never go out and go, hey guys, it's
silver bullet.
It's just us. No, we are going to represent this much. That is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. The scale of what needs to happen, so I think, I think we all in the interest of the industry, of the world, et cetera, that, all this stuff has to happen.
Hey, Harry, how did you get into energy in the beginning?
So
were you just a nerd from the beginning? I
actually did my undergrad in history.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So where were you going to go? Law, politics?
And then I was going to go law, did a bit of law work, and I was like, nope, this sounds like awful. So then I went to business school, and then I did that amazing thing of great timing where I finished business school in 2008. So my best
the collapse of the secondary market.
Internship are gone, and then it was, then like et cetera, et cetera. So Lehman's, that interview didn't happen, So then I was like, what's interesting? And at the time, this is when the carbon markets were being launched kind of established in UK and Europe. And I was like, that's quite an interesting concept. And I was like, well, how, cap and trade, that's quite interesting. Got out, I didn't really, wasn't that interested in it after I got to understand it better. But what was interesting was this concept called CDM, which is essentially where you could develop a carbon offset project in an emerging market like India, and the net benefit of that project would create credits which were funded by a European heavy industrial. So I got involved in that space. So I was going out in India and developing projects there, which was pretty far out. Yeah. And that was then led into energy. And then I moved from there to an infrastructure fund. And then that's when I got disillusioned with the feed-in tariff. And that's when I went to Mexico. And so I set up a solar business in Mexico with my partner. And we bought and bought some developments, built them out, signed a few PPAs, moved into distributed generation, worked with Solar City for a few years, put together a green bond for them. That all went poof when Tesla took over. Oh. And then we set up, Kiwa Power, which we brought Marubeni in, and that was a incredible experience. I mean, Marubeni are an amazing company, so they put a lot of time and effort and patience into getting that company going. So that's probably the first or second distributed generation company in Mexico. And that was, I left Mexico 2023, but I was going back and forth, and it was about 2020, 2021, I started working with the
What part of Mexico, by the way?
Sorry?
What part of Mexico?
I was based in Mexico City.
Okay.
Which is, if you've been.
Of course.
Yeah. So I was very lucky. I was there in the fun bit. Okay. 2013 to 2020 was a good time.
Nice. Very cool. I've done work all throughout Mexico. Monterrey is probably my favorite part of that country, but there's great places wherever you go down there.
Yeah, I mean, I think once you understand Mexico, it's a fantastic place.
So it's such a diverse area. But well, listen, what else did I ask that you feel that's worth noting right now?
I think we've touched on. Well, I said, look, I think we've got to the point where we're ready to engage. I think this is,
How can people engage with you that are listening right now? How do they find you? Pristine Energy, it's called?
Yeah, pristineenergy.com. So
Harry, what's your last name?
Beamish.
How do you spell it?
Beamish.
So there are people that are listening. They're going to just start looking you up on YouTube. I mean, on LinkedIn and try to engage.
I haven't got to YouTube yet, but I'm following you.
Well, listen, man, this podcast will be on it in another week or so, I'm guessing. But look, this is great, man. I know that we just met. It's like speed dating, but when you started explaining to me some of the things you're doing, I get access to see a lot of cool shit in the United States. And it's great to see what you guys are doing over here, because there are many respects in which what we do in the US, maybe on some means and methods or certain things, maybe we're just a year or two ahead on certain things, but there are certainly things here that you guys have a head start on. You guys are more advanced in certain things. I do think that the scale that we build out there and the scale that you build out here, the disparity between that offers one group over the other, maybe a better advantage sometimes on design iterations and evolution, where I was trying to explain it. I go, if I had to bifurcate or if I had to explain the difference between the product that we build in the United States and the product that we build over here in Europe, it would be in the United States, the product is called volume and speed.
Yeah.
And over here, your product is, because it's allowed to be built at a much smaller scale, the product is really sustainable. It's reliable, not that ours aren't, but yours a big focus on reliability, where we design reliability through distributed redundancy. You guys are still trying to find the most reliable, most sustainable, the most cost efficient with the highest quality product. When you build at our speed, you make up for that by offsetting it with other volume. Here, you guys are trying to do less with more, right? And it makes sense culturally. You guys are extremely efficient on how you guys are trying to utilize shit, and you guys have a much more mature nation. I was saying, like, this building that we're speaking in right now is probably older than the United States, right? And it's the headquarter of punk rock. Ireland is, and Dublin is. I mean, have you been down in the green room and saw U2 and all the amazing bands that have performed here? You're like, there's a lot of shit. If these walls could talk, a lot of transformation in that music world took place in this building. Now it's about technology taking place, and this building's running that application. So there's so many changes, but the culture that exists here gives us something to pay attention to and follow and learn from. And I think it's reciprocating on the things that we do in the US, because someone asked me a question the other day, like, what's the most volume you've ever put up at one time? I'm like, 75 megawatts in 13 months isn't hard to do in the United States. You know, you could never get away with doing something like that here, only because of regulation. And you guys are a much more mature nation, and the means and methods and how you guys build things are much different than us, right? So, but that's not a bad thing. That's also a very healthy thing. And there's a lot to be learned from both sides of the pond, which is why I'm spending time over here now, too.
Yeah, and I think, that's what's interesting. That's what I believe is interesting about Pristine. The innovation started here, but it's being Americanized and, being led by, a big power guy in the US who's done it all. And, I'm like, this is what we should be doing. And, Tom's running with it.
Well, I'd love to meet Tom one day, and we host another conference in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, absolutely.
I welcome you and invite you to come to that one. It's going to be in September, and we'll have it's a little bit of a different monster, same type of theme, same type of gritty theme and environment, just a couple thousand people instead of 500-600, right?
Some barbecue, some queso.
There's a good chance you'll find some of the best barbecue of your life there. So, but look, this was the beginning of this conversation, the beginning of this relationship, not the end of it. And I'm very thankful that you gave us your time and helped us break down this. Thanks for letting me throw a bunch of questions at you.
I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks for joining the revolution. Thanks for coming to the conference.
Cheers,
all right, man.
Cheers.
Thanks.